Yeah, so welcome, come in, there's still room. Yeah, today, maybe we're not gonna give the most technical talk of the day, but we're gonna talk a little bit about how to use LLMs and AI and like maybe a little bit more philosophical. And what prompted our little talk here is the question, in what context is a superior question to when AGI? I mean, if you look at the news right now, like, for example, Sam Altman said, next year, AGI. I don't know. I don't know, but that also depends on...
It's better than saying every time next 10 years, next 5
yeah,
years.
of course,
Next years,
yeah.
It's the Tesla way, right?
Yeah, the Tesla way, yeah. So Sam is next year. And yeah, so AGI, but also what is AGI, of course. But so that prompted for us to think about like what context. And so yeah, maybe a little
bit of, so you notice we are both pretty chaotic and we respond to each other. So we need a bit of structure here. And that's also for you. We're going through a lot of high level concepts, and it can apply to you as a user, but also to you as a software architect or as a software engineer. And this is the structure that you can make sense of the storyline a little bit. And in the end, we come back again to the start. So that's hopefully our roadmap next year.
Yeah. So we start with disclaimer, a little bit about us. Yeah.
So every talk I give a little bit of explainer. So the first one is basically nobody knows what they're doing. So we're pretty relatively old, and we still don't know what we're doing. And I think that's important to know that everybody's stumbling through life. And in the talk at Pygrunn, I give a little bit more context to this. But this is basically the simplified Dunning-Kruger. The more you know, the more you understand you have no clue what you're talking about. And that's really important because we're trying to convey some knowledge, information to you. But please be really critical about what we're saying, and also be critical to your own conclusions on this, because we don't know what we're doing, but you also don't know what you're doing. And together we might have a better clue what we're doing, but please stay critical on all the things what you hear today, also in the other talks. And now something about us.
Yeah. So, yeah, Edzo, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so we're basically the same age. So we're from the 80s, and I were born here in Groningen. I was born and raised here. And I did my bachelor's here, and later on I also started working here. I'm currently switched from 20 years of IT consulting into teaching, because I thought after 20 years doing all the stuff at companies, it's way nicer to share that knowledge. And that's, I like what Berko's idea of sharing the knowledge in open source. Only together we can improve, and not in some company in a small context. And currently I'm so next to teaching also doing my PhD in cyber resilience, because nobody knows what we're doing, and that does something with our idea of business value, business continuity. And that is also the pinpoint where we found each other on value.
Yeah, and so for me it's basically reversed, because I started with a PhD in AI, and then I went into industry, and now I work at N8N, where we do a lot of cool stuff also with AI. So maybe it will come back a little bit in the talk, but yeah. So yeah, my background is in AI. I studied here in Groningen, and yeah, I think we met 21 years ago or something like that.
Yeah,
I think it was just before I moved to Groningen.
And perhaps even longer if you think about it, but it's crazy long.
Anyway, that's enough about us. So we're here to talk about the golden age, right? Everybody is talking about AI. AI is everywhere. Every product needs to have AI. If you want to sell a pen, you have to say there's AI in it, then everyone will buy the pen. And this is what everybody is talking about, right? So World Economic Forum is talking about the golden age. Forbes is talking about the golden age. Everybody. Are we though? Are we really in the golden age of AI?
And this is a really important question, because if you look at the earning calls of the hyperscalers, so the Microsofts and the Googles, they spend an enormous amount of their cash money in data centers. So this is not funny strategic stuff, that is hard money that is being sold everywhere. So in 4 years, so 2027, 3 years, 2/3 of all data centers will be of the hyperscalers of the world. They are buying all the hardware. And that's interesting. So the golden age itself means on a business level a lot.
Yeah. So in this, I don't know if you know this, this video. This is peak AI. This is an image of gymnastics at like a big stage, maybe Olympics or something like that, generated with something like what OpenAI has, and all these people doing now video generation by prompting. And what comes out is a weird mess. No consistency, no understanding of the physics behind what's going on here. So, yeah, if you just ask them to generate a puppy, of course, they've seen like thousands of puppies, millions of puppies, and kittens maybe, and all these kind of things. And this is an edge case because there is not so much material out there on physics.
And the question is it an edge case or is it a fundamental case? Because we know how LLM works, right? And the question is, can we solve this with LLM? Because we have game engines that already fix this, but can it be combined? And this is in a YouTube film. It's from, I think, August 24, so it's really recent.
Yeah. And so we started thinking about what our edge cases are out there, and you had an interesting one with pixels.
So on the left, we have a sheep. And there are security researchers that are trying to find out if I have an image, how much white noise, so a pixel or multiple pixels, I need to add to get a total different response. And this has been done in, I think, 2017, and this image is from, I think, 2024. So it's still an issue. So if we have an LLM and we give it input, for example, an image, we cannot trust the output because it's a bit distorted. It's completely different. And there are many examples of this. So that's an interesting part. The causality behind LLM is lacking inherent.
Yeah, and so some people also from Cohere, they started digging into what things like ChatGPT and Claude and all these vendors do, and they process text by tokenizing it, right? And what they found is that there are some glitch tokens that are, if you use them in your prompt, it will stop generating or will generate complete rubbish, and that's why it's called fishing for magic carp, because there's a token for magic carp, and apparently there was a user on Reddit that posted a lot in some counting forum or something like that. They just count up to like millions, and that was a guy that was very active there, and so it got in the training set. But if you then look at all the text that they use for training these LLMs, that token is not really that important in the grand scheme of things. So it starts to be suppressed, and that's why we think like edge cases are still out there, even with the way sophisticated artificial intelligence that we now have. And so why do we care so much about edge cases? And if you think about it, like OpenAI and Anthropic and so on, they tout their machines as being general models that you can use for anything, and you can use them on any topic that you want or in any case that you think.
And that's why they get the money, right? I have this perfect magic oil, and give me the monies, and I will fix the whole world. I will make your company so super efficient. You can fire all the people.
Yeah, and but if you think about it, we don't know what these edge cases are. We don't know what the training data is. We don't know what kind of fine-tuning they did. We don't know what the actual architecture is that they use underneath. For some, you might have a guess, but because there are some open weights things. But yeah, we don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes in these bigger companies. And that's a problem if you want to use AI in a highly regulated or a very specific niche. Right? So if you have a very specific task that is not so present in the data set of these LLMs, then you have a problem, because then you don't know what is coming out. And so these models are trained on examples, and the more examples you give, the better, of course. But you see some sort of top off, so drop off in performance gains. The more data they throw at it, it's not scaling as much anymore. And these edge cases are then just expected errors that these training things get. And you need other ways of dealing with those edge cases. So you need few-shot learning or fine-tuning or these kind of things to handle that.
And I think this is the fundamental problem of AI, and that we should be aware of. Because if we are aware of something, we can act upon it and do something in our design or in our usage of it.
Yeah, and so this is what we believe. You need context in your AI.
And context is a difficult word, even with the limited amount of letters. So we're going to peel the onion a little bit. This is a model that's super abstract, and therefore it's lacking a lot of depth for reality. But what I try to communicate here is that with LLMs, we generate data and we use it for the learning again. And even with people behind it. So we post images, we post text on the internet generated by LLM, and we poison our own well. And this is how LLM works. But we humans also work like that. So why is it different for an LLM and a human? And that's because we as humans have some intermediate steps behind it. So just as we, if we train data sets, we gather the data set, so that we do the same, observe reality, and we crunch through the data sets. But we as humans use our mental models for it. And that's for everybody here different, because we are taught differently, we are educated differently, different traumas, different experiences, different moods. So our mental model is different than the default LLM models you put in there in your multi-model architecture. And after that, we behave. And the behavior creates data, and not directly data. And there's a difference between the two flows. And the people of you that are in IT or electrical engineering might also see that we have feedback loops here. And those things create strange behavior. And that's also something to be really cautious about.
Yeah, and another, so the behavior is important, right? Because an LLM will stop behaving after it's done generating the text, right? Whereas our thoughts and our minds will continue, and you can come back a week later and say, hi, I thought about it some more, and here is something else that I want to say about it, or you act upon it, or you go into your organization because you learned something, you change your mental model, and you try to convince other people. An LLM is not going to do that for you, right? So you need to think about that in terms of context.
And we even do that real time. So you pay respondent on me, and I will respond to you, depending on how your facial expression changes on what I'm saying. So that feedback loop there is totally different and optimizing itself continuously. That is so different.
And so this is also what Edzo was saying just earlier. There's the diversity of the mind in the group here, in your organization and in society and everywhere, right? Whereas if you're interacting with ChatGPT, you're interacting with one model. You're interacting with a single model that's always with the same, has the same weights, whether I do it or you do it. I mean, the difference is you probably use different words while you're prompting, and therein lies the crux, because that is the context that you can give to an LLM to basically change its mind for a little bit, right? That's the thing. Yeah, so we come to context, and we try to come up with a little bit of a model for this. And so context can be generated in society, like very big. Like we need to learn how to work with AI and LLMs and these things, and that seeps down through your organization. How you work with AI in your organization. You have processes in mind that you are using AI in, and maybe those processes change, and that therefore the context also changes in stuff like that. But eventually, it's people that use AI, right? And how they work with AI is through this very small area that's the prompt. The only way that you react to an LLM or that you give context to an LLM is by typing it, by giving it a prompt, and by thinking about what I need to put in that prompt.
And it's important to understand that you as a person interacting with the prompt and trying to formulate your prompt, there's a lot of complexity you are reducing. So people that are in more an organizational strategy field, foresight, or are more in designing business processes or designing organizations know limiting and putting on paper what's going on and what is the context is really difficult. And then you put it into a prompt. So there's a lot of steps of reduction that you're doing.
Yeah, and yeah, so this pyramid that's going down towards the prompt is then expanded again through the context of the providers of these models, right? So OpenAI has some thoughts about how to feature engineer their transformer architecture, which then translates into the model architecture that can be very different from model to model, but is the same every time you interact with it, right? So that model architecture might also change how you use a particular AI model. So for example, if you have a mixture of experts, it might be different in how you work with it, or if it's a visual language model that also allows you to upload images and stuff like that. There's a lot of context there, and yeah. So why do we believe this context is so important? Well, you need to provide relevant data for the AI to make a prediction, right? That's what we discussed. You need to interact with that prompt by downloading and compressing all that context you have from society, your organization, what you want out of it. But you also have to provide a relevant language, which is important. For example, also if you, for example, summarize text and you think that LLMs are very good at summarizing, but that's probably only because you tell it, I need to summarize a piece of text for my boss that has this kind of context, and therefore I need to use this kind of language. And you also need to provide the intent, right? You have an intent. The LLM doesn't have an intent. So you need to provide what you want to get out of it, how it needs to work, and stuff like that. And yeah, your training data might be subtly, but importantly, different from your own organizational data. Your organizational data is much more volatile. It changes all the time. The way that you use it, the context in which you use these processes and how these processes work, they can change.
So that's why we made the image of the two pyramids. You are talking to a reflection of reality, to a small universe with your LLM, and you need to translate it to your own context to understand what's going on.
Yeah, this is the value of data.
Yeah, and this is the basic part where it hinges. So in the essence, data has no value at all, but we need to create it into information based on our context. And this is really old theory. And information only has value in the moment you're going to apply it in a certain context. And here you have twice the word context. And that's why we had the two pyramids. That doesn't work for LLM. So we are creating a lot of gibberish, so we are poisoning the pool of data without any context. And then we as humans, every different second, we have a different context. So the information, because it's more than data, what we get from the prompt or the image, does it fit our context, what we're doing right now? And does it resemble? What are we doing? And this is we don't have the answer yet, but it has impact on that value part because of this decoupling. And this is even an older theory. So this is from 1949. And the idea is that if we communicate to each other, on the left side we have a sender with an intention to communicate. And everything what we use, words, functional designs, process descriptions, are a way to convey our intent. And we find different media to communicate. And in the end, somebody is receiving it. So you all are receiving the same message at this moment, but you all translate it in a different way because you have a different room to act. Or the perspection for action. And that's the thing. And the question is, how does this work with LLM? And I don't know it yet, but I do know there's a tension there.
Yeah, and the tension is both ways, right? So does an LLM have intention? Well, only the intention maybe that the builder of the LLM put into it, right? If you ask OpenAI, they have American values encoded in that, probably, right? But the other way around, also, if you're talking to an LLM, what is the perspective for action? Is there a perspective for action for an LLM? And so then we get to the solutions. Well, we might not have solutions for everything, but we do have some solutions. Yeah. Berko is disappointed. So.
So we made a long list.
Yeah. So, rest assured. So the obvious first thing is, of course, add that context, right? And how do you add context? You can do that in several different ways, but a good one, and something that I come back to often, is collect data and label some examples. Gather examples for things that you think work well. And what you then do, if you add them to your prompt, is what they call in-context learning. So the word context is in there, so you have to add that context. You have to give them good examples of what a good summary looks like, or what a good email looks like, or a good classification looks like for the different edge cases that you'd identified in your use case. And you can do that in different ways. So if you're using Anthropic models, they suggest using pseudo XML, right? So you give them a couple of tags, like this is an example summary, this is example 1, example 2, and then you move on. But if you're using OpenAI models, they are trained mostly with Markdown. So you can use sections and headings and backticks and these kind of things. So these are low-level prompting techniques that you can use to provide that context. Another very important thing is visualizing your data and actually looking at it. So if you do that, that will help you understand what these edge cases are in your organization or in your use case that you're trying to use with your AI models. It also helps you to debug your process and allow you to label examples. Of course, I have to toot my own horn a little bit. This is what we really care about at NNN. So if you're building a workflow, you can look at every step of the way, what goes in and what goes out, and you can then label them. And that is something that is super important. So data is also for evaluation. If you're evaluating your AI application, you have to think about at what level you want to evaluate everything, right? You want to, not everything needs to be tested end to end. Because if you're doing retrieval augmented generation, there's two steps in there. There's generation, but there's also the retrieval part. And the retrieval part is very tricky to get right. This is what a lot of people nowadays get wrong. They just chuck a vector store at the problem and then they call it quits. But that's not how you should think about this. If you have multilingual documents that you need to process for a chatbot, you need to think about how to represent your text in the right way, and you have to test that. You have to test whether these embeddings are actually working well for this use case. And then this is something that I bring out a lot. I think last year in my talk at Pygrunn, I also said this. So there's human in the loop. You have to collaborate, stop, collaborate and listen. You have to make sure that you can easily roll back any decision that an AI makes.
Or basically, don't let an AI make the decision in reality, because it has no awareness of the context. It's generating the random data. So it's good in generating something, but in the end, if you affect reality, we need the human there. We need the human to make sense of it, because we create an interesting Kafka hell then.
Yeah, and so there's human in the loop at several levels, right? So it's like before you send something, after you send something, but also when you look back at what everything has been done by your model, you want to label them for later use, which is bringing them back.
And this is the link with resilience. So people that are in companies active know that there's a lot of resilience legislation coming on in the US and the EU. And it's about, in the past, we designed IT systems, we designed process and organization in a way. We throw the coin in and it all rolls back there and it works. But we never had an undo in it. We never had to roll back in the process itself. And that's something that's really important if we're going to do this.
Yeah, and then this is something that you often come up with, Edzo, is deep conversations.
Yeah, so when I did computer science, I was never taught how to ask a question. So it was a small part of computer science and requirements elicitation, do an interview. When I was raised as an enterprise architect, that's social science, I never was taught about social science and how to have a thoughtful conversation. So I put a few old school examples here about what a sentence can mean and which question you can ask to validate, because these are not reductionistic statements, these are hypotheses you need to validate. So if I'm going to say, nice seeing you again, we have a lot of meanings it can have, but the only way to validate if this is true, to interact and validate the hypothesis. And that's something that's really important. So if I have data, how the hell I'm going to validate the meaning of what's LLM saying, of what is a person saying? And this is how you can peel the context around if you have interaction with somebody.
Yeah, and I think this is our last slide. We think it's not about technology, it's not about process, it's all about intention. Give your intention, think about your intention, how you want to use the LLM, how you want to use the model, but also how you want to talk to other people. Especially if you use AI, think about what it means if you just throw out AI-generated content. What is the intention behind it? And yeah, so that's where we open the floor for your critical thinking.
Thanks a lot.